One of the interesting things about the internet industry, if you look at it over the last 20 years since it's been a commercial entity, is we've had these incredible lead changes. Everyone always says, okay, you pick the winner and you hold it forever and so forth. Mid-90s, AOL was going to be the company of the next century. Then AOL crashed and burned. Yahoo took over. Yahoo was going to be the forever company. Then it was Google that was going to be the forever company. Then we had Facebook come out of nowhere, take over a whole big piece of it. And when Facebook went public last year, lots of people were saying, well, that's it. Facebook's going to crush Google. It's all over. Search is boring. It's all going to move to social and social search. Hasn't happened quite that way yet. But one of the big questions is this going to happen in search? Is Google, which is now just such a dominant company worldwide, going to be the company for the next 100 years, or is it going to be destroyed by some companies like the folks here? So we have this wonderful panel. We'll talk about lots of different aspects of it. Talk about Apple, talk about Facebook, talk about mobile, talk about TV, and all those cool things. But first, let me just start by introducing the panel quickly. First, Albert Wenger. Is that a good approximation? We don't call him Wenger in the US. It's Wenger. I'm sorry. But Albert is a venture capitalist at Union Square Ventures, which it's no exaggeration to say is one of the single best venture capital firms in the United States and probably in the world. According to venture capital returns, they have pretty much the highest returns of any firm out there. So congratulations. You're also an investor in a company called DuckDuckGo, which is an alternative search engine. So you can talk a little bit about that. Philip Engelbrecht of Rockmelt. Rockmelt is a new sort of web browser that combines search into the browser, specifically on mobile. I'll let Philip talk a little bit more, but an Andreessen Horowitz company, huge fanfare in the US. And Wolf Garbe, who runs a next generation search engine, P2P search, distributed search, which has been around for a while, but we'll talk about that as well. So, gentlemen, let me just start off. Give us just a quick snapshot of DuckDuckGo, Rockmelt, and Farouk.
So DuckDuckGo is a search engine that's premised on the idea that there are searches for which you want to be assured of privacy, and also where you want to see the same results as everybody else. So the idea is there are certain types of searches where the last thing you want is for your search result to accidentally appear on your Facebook timeline or in your Google Plus account. And this could be because you're researching something about a disease, for instance, which may be for yourself or for a relative, or because you're researching a politically sensitive topic. So there are any number of searches where privacy plays an important role. And also there are any number of searches where you would like to know what the search engine has as its results, independent of what the search engine thinks you are interested in or your friends are interested. That's the simple premise behind DuckDuckGo.
So let me just follow up 2 questions quickly. Privacy. Every time Facebook does something huge to do, it's terrible privacy invasion, they get dragged through the press, everything else. DuckDuckGo, it sounds like, is premised on the idea that people want to maintain privacy. Is that true, or do people actually not care at all?
Well, I think the tremendous growth of something like Snapchat shows that people do actually care about privacy.
This is the sexting app?
That's what some people call it, but I think a lot of young people are using it simply because they're tired of certain pictures that they think are funny at the moment coming back to kind of bite them later on. I think we'll talk about graph search later, but I think graph search is going to expose a fundamental flaw in Facebook's privacy model.
That's Facebook search. Philip, Rockmelt?
Yeah, sure thing. So Rockmelt is a browser. We're heavily optimized for mobiles and tablets. So like one of the features that you will see is when you consume content, it will come to you without the advertising, so it's a very clean screen, comes blazing fast. We do a lot of optimization in the background, including caching. It even works partially offline. It syncs across devices, and so we just noticed how other browsers, when they move to mobile or tablet, they just kind of merely copy what you have on the desktop. And we just felt that wasn't kind of the right value proposition to consumers. So we built Rockmelt around that, and it's currently available on iTunes, and very soon on Android and Windows 8.
And Wolf, what is distributed search?
Yeah, Faro is decentralizing search. Normal search engines require huge data centers to answer all those queries from the whole world, and we do it in a different way. We use peer-to-peer technology. We are connecting people and their idle computer resources to build a distributed worldwide web search engine. And this technology saves costs, and these low costs allow us to provide a free API and to enable others to build the search they want.
Great. Okay, so let's go into the first big topic. Last 2 weeks, in the United States, in the technology community, nobody has been able to talk about anything except what is Facebook going to announce at their mystery press conference where they called everybody weeks ahead of time and they said, come see this extraordinary announcement we're going to come out with. Lots of betting as to what it was going to be. When they finally had the announcement, it was graph search, a new Facebook kinda search engine. This was met with screams of joy. Wow, they're going to revolutionize search. They're going to kill Google. To yawns. People saying, okay, how is this different? Why is this cool? Why did you call a press conference? Gentlemen, is Facebook search important in any way, or is this another dud product out of Facebook?
I think Facebook search is a great people search, but the focus is quite narrow. And so I don't think that Facebook search at this stage can compete with a general web search like Google.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I think I haven't tried the product, so whatever I'm saying is kind of biased by what I've read and seen, like most other people, by the way. But I have a certain level of discomfort with it in the sense of the inputs that go into graph search, right? I would say both the quality and the quantity of the social inputs that they have is questionable. I mean, I may like something because I do it as a favor to my friend, or I may like something because I think it's funny, but that's not generally me. And if search is based around that, that's tricky. But vice versa, there's 100 things that I like every day, and I share very little of that to Facebook. I post to Facebook maybe 4 or 5 times a month. That's it. I just don't want to spam. And if I could dramatize, I would say it's beyond garbage in, garbage out. There's potentially not even enough garbage going in to recycle it into something valuable. And so again, without having seen the product, it's something that I question deeply.
So let me pick up on that, because effectively what Philip is saying is before Facebook launched search, everyone said, oh, Facebook search be so amazing because they have so much data that Google doesn't have. They have the social graph. This will make search so much better. And what people realized pretty quickly when they tried it is that if it's based on Facebook likes, what you say that you like, you know what? Maybe you don't like everything that you like. And maybe you liked something because you wanted to get rid of it, because it popped up in your timeline and you thought it was something and you were trying to click on something else. And people are starting to realize, hey, is this actually going to be better and more accurate than Google? And Philip, it sounds like you might be thinking maybe it won't be.
So let me take the other side of that argument for a second. So, and I'm far from a Facebook fan. But I think anything that has signal from 1 billion people shouldn't be ignored, because I think one of the things we've learned over the last few years is that even with relatively noisy data, if you have a lot of it, algorithms are pretty smart at picking out signal out of even relatively noisy data, as long as you have a lot of it, and Facebook does have a lot of it. I think the really interesting challenge will be whether this search focuses people's mind on what I think is a fundamental flaw in sort of Facebook's privacy model, which is the idea that there's some intermediate stage between a private message and a completely public message. So, if I send you an email, I have some presumption of privacy. Well, actually not you, because you're a journalist, so you might publish it. But if I send Esther an email, I have some presumption that it's a private email that won't immediately find its way to the internet. Conversely, if I put something on Twitter, it is public and it's posted to the entire internet, modulo China. So Facebook has this idea that there's something in between where you can post something to 500 of your best friends and it's somehow neither private nor public. And I think that's going to be increasingly a problem as that data gets surfaced more and more, and in more circumstances where people didn't expect that it might show up. And I think that's the potential challenge for graph search. But as an idea, I think it's a fascinating idea. And in a way, I wish that Google had built it, and I wish that Google had built it in a different way, which is where they would have partnered with the providers or the potential providers of social signals. So where they would have partnered with a Twitter or a Foursquare or a Yelp or all of these companies, instead of trying to build all the social signal themselves, as they've currently chosen.
And so pick up on this on the social importance to search relevance, because obviously you have Google coming at it from the search side, adding the social features, Facebook coming at it from the social side, trying to get into search. Is there some ideal in the middle that is, you were just saying a minute ago that customization is bad, that you actually want to see what the search engine recommends to everybody, not and so forth. Is there some happy medium right in the middle that some company is going to get to and win the world?
I think it's like asking for a yes or no answer on privacy, and I think it's going to be hard to get that. So this is a very personalized, maybe extreme position. I think it would work really well if it wasn't just kind of like indexing all your likes and dislikes on Facebook, but really it indexed my entire calendar, my entire email in a very anonymous way, and now that becomes, accessible or findable through search, again, in an anonymized way, but that will help me find certain, diamonds in the roughs or things that I couldn't find otherwise. That's just a very extreme position. It's like, go the whole way out. That might just be better.
So I don't think that there can be one search to rule them all. I think that there are specific areas of search where people will make the effort to go someplace else and search there. And so, we have the situation where on any platform that you're on, you have a default search engine, and we can talk about whether or not regulators ought to do something about how easy it is to swap out your default search engine. But leaving that aside, it basically means that anybody who's trying to do something else in search is one click further away, which means that you have to deliver that much incremental value that the consumer is willing to take that one click in order to get to the thing that you do. And so I think there are examples of that's perfectly possible. So we were investors in a company called Indeed. Indeed's motto is one search, all jobs. And that's all they did. It was a search engine for jobs. And obviously, when you're in the market for a job, you're really interested in finding a job, and you're very willing to take that one click to get a search engine. That's all it does. I think similarly, if you're trying to research something that you're concerned about privacy implications, you're probably willing to take that one click if you care enough. And so I think ultimately, it's not about is graph search the be-all, end-all, is Google the be-all, end-all. It's rather, what is the purpose? What is it that you're looking for? And hence, you will go to the right place. I mean, already today, unfortunately also owned by Google, but the second largest search engine in the world is YouTube. So if you want to go find a video, you don't go anywhere else. You just start right at YouTube.
And so that brings about specialized search and vertical search. The way most big markets evolve is that you have a couple of generalist players who serve the entire market. There's one big one that has most of the profit, then a slightly smaller one. Then you have a whole bunch of specialists that survive. It's the folks who get caught in the middle that are in trouble. They can't figure out exactly what they do. So sounds like DuckDuckGo might, in fact, say, here's where you search. If you want nobody else to know about it, you want it to be totally private. Wolf, why would people go to Faru? What's the message? And is this the way that smaller search engines can build a business for themselves?
I think while today Google is recognized as probably the best web search engine, there's also a demand for more diversity in search results. So there's a lot of discussion that we have to deal with biased rankings, which are controlled by one central instance, and I think people in general don't want this. So they want competition and they want diversity, and I think this is where small search engines can contribute. And on the example from Faru, we are not only contributing in additional or in diverse search results, we are also contributing in a diverse architecture, which is a novelty.
All right, Facebook also, one of the reasons that people began apologizing for Facebook, saying, the reason the announcement was so lame was because Facebook's worried about Microsoft. Because Facebook has a big search deal with Microsoft, don't forget, very important to them. So maybe the idea is that Facebook is just going to roll out this new search engine with a very limited purpose for just a little while, then the Microsoft deal will run out, then Facebook will boot Microsoft out and take over the whole thing and start to take over the world. So let's back up. Microsoft. Bing. Bing, it's been around longer than I would have thought. I have to say, I thought Microsoft would have given up by now. And in the United States, they have about 15% of the market. If you add in Yahoo, it's maybe 25%. Google has everything else and everything on mobile. Does Microsoft have any future, or are they just flushing money down the toilet? With Bing, let's start with that.
I actually would start my answer by saying I'll make the prediction that in a year from today, Microsoft or Bing will have increased, if not significantly increased, its market share against Google. What most people don't realize, and what's happening right now with the release of Windows 8, it's a program called Jumpstart. When OEMs build and ship PCs, they have to buy for a Windows license. Microsoft will give them kickbacks on those licenses for marketing spend, right? With the release of Windows 8, Microsoft has tied those Jumpstart dollars to two things. One, IE has to be the default browser in Windows 8. Two, Bing has to be the default search provider in the Windows 8 operating system. Google is losing every single OEM deal as we speak, right? And of course, you know, so that's a very, you know, you could call this a very short-term, a short-sighted premise from Microsoft to kind of act this way, because they're betting on two things, right? It's one, Windows 8 prevailing, becoming a success, and I guess Chrome OS completely faltering. I think for the next year, I think Bing will go up. After that, you know, I'm not so sure about Windows 8. Chrome OS seems to have a lot of success in the early days. It was one of the Asus machines, was one of the best sellers on Amazon, I think it was last week. So that's how I see Bing evolving.
Very pro Microsoft, very startling opinion. Do either of you want to jump in before I do?
Well, search globally is such a huge market that for anybody to think that it's a long-term sustainable equilibrium for one player to have as big a market share, I think it's just unlikely. Because there's so much at stake, I think it makes sense for Microsoft to invest as much money as they have, even if it's been slow going. I'm not very sanguine about Microsoft's new operating system offerings, etc., but I know Chi, who runs the search group, and they know what they're doing, and they're building a quality product. Now, I think whenever you're competing head-on with somebody, that's the hardest form of competition. I mean, it's their, you know, it's Avis to Hertz or whatever. So I think it's quite respectable where they've gotten to. It's cost them a lot of money, but it seems like a sensible investment among all the things that they're otherwise investing in.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So here, the one point that I would make is there's lots of search going on mobile devices now. And in fact, if you look at the global world for connected devices, smartphones are still growing incredibly rapidly, tablets are growing incredibly rapidly, PCs are shrinking. This would have been unheard of 10 years ago that the PC market would start to shrink. It's shrinking. And Microsoft's ownership of it is shrinking. So I feel like the platform is becoming less and less of a lever that Microsoft can get in there, but they have carved this out. The problem is on mobile, they have no market share. It's not 16% or 30%, it's almost zero, and Google has almost all of that. For somebody to knock out Google, is it possible to do with a new, better product, or does Google have to screw up?
I think Google is definitely the strongest player in the mobile search right now, and the only possible competitor I can see would be Apple if they would go to search and connect it to their device. On the other side, they had some problems with their map application, so we will have to see if they do it in this way.
This is, I think, is happening. So if you kind of look back in history, early 2003, Google went out of its way to change search behavior. They didn't want you to go to google.com anymore, and definitely not to yahoo.com. They wanted you to perform those searches out of the toolbar, and then they launched Chrome out of the navigation bar. And they've done really well at that. If you look at the old Rockwell desktop browser, 80% of searches came from the nav bar. People didn't go to google.com anymore. I think they're just doing this all over again with mobile, where they're educating people to do search through voice, right? And they integrate that with the OS, and if they can swing it their way, they'll convince the OEM to have even a button on the phone to make search that way. And so if you're an entrant in the market and you don't have that, right? You're not part of the OS, or you're not part of the device, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think it's going to be increasingly difficult if and when Google starts to make significant how shall I say, payouts on search, i.e. they syndicate the monetization. They've done that very well on the web. They've done very little in mobile, right? Just with a handful of carriers, to the extent that they really ramp that up, right? Then as let's say, as a browser or as a publisher, you're going to be very reluctant to switch Google out, right? Because you're going to lose that certainty of revenue against it. And for, to bet against Google is probably not a smart thing to do. So Apple is following, is maybe a bit reactionary, but I think it's going to be very difficult to get in there. Yeah.
I think part of this also depends on how you're defining the scope of search, right? So there are plenty of applications that include search as a component of what they do. So, Foursquare Explorer is a type of search. And if you are firing up an application to search on something specific that is wrapped into another value proposition, I think head-on competition with Google on just saying we want to be the default search on your phone is going to be incredibly difficult. But figuring something out that you can peel off on the side, I think, is where competition is going to come from. And one of the things that Dr. Koh, for instance, is doing is they're taking a different relationship with the sources of information. So one of the things that has changed on the internet over the last few years is that instead of sort of a vast ocean of content, there are sort of pools of knowledge. Whether you take something like Stack Exchange, or whether you take something like Yelp or Foursquare, there's sort of pools of knowledge around specific domains. And one of the things that Dr. Koh is doing is partnering with those pools and making it possible for their results to appear directly in Dr. Koh search results. And unlike Google, Dr. Koh doesn't have any competitive properties. So again, I think if you want to compete with Google, you have to go and do things that Google, for whatever reason, whether it's their business model or kind of their approach to search, can't or doesn't want to do. Any kind of head-on approach, I think, is going to be doomed.
Well, let's take, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to add another thing. If we are talking about the future of mobile search, this is probably not limited to smartphones. For example, if you think of Google Glasses, so smart devices you wear on your head, you can think of several very interesting ways to search in the future. For example, you are meeting somebody and you get instantly, automatically searched their profile, or you looking in the shop for some products and you get more detailed information on that product. And as we can see, Google is already into that market, and I think that will very much strengthen their position in mobile search.
So you think Google Glasses are going to be cool and people are going to use them, or do you think they're going to say, oh, I would never be seen in those horrible things and run away?
I'm absolutely convinced that this will be a hit and people will be wearing it, and they have integrated cameras, and so Google will have instant access to millions of cameras, and this will, for example, enable a new kind of street view or something else. So I find this very interesting.
All right, so you brought up Apple before, so let's talk about Apple. You remember about a couple of years ago when Apple launched Siri? In the demo, Siri was so awesome, so funny and clever, and everyone was going to search by talking to their phone, and that was going to kill Google, and Apple was going to go to $1 bazillion a share. Then Siri actually came out on the phone, and people realized that the best use of Siri was to amuse 10-year-olds when they would ask Siri questions and she would say something unintelligible or weird in response. Because Siri in the real world, just doesn't quite work that well. And also, I would suggest, people actually don't want to talk to their phones. They like to type. They don't want to be Captain Kirk unless they're driving and they can't type. So Siri's not been the big hit that people think, but there are still hopes that there's going to be a better way to search than typing, and it's going to be voice. So is that true, or is this just one of these consensual hallucinations that the tech industry gets in every once in a while about what's going to be next? Do people really want to search with voice, and is there going to be a great way to do that other than Siri?
Well, Google has a big leg up on voice search because they've invested so heavily in machine learning and in the ability to understand voice. So it's the kind of thing where it seems wrong, as long as the experience is wonky, and if the experience is suddenly right, it may be the right thing, and we may be just on the borderline of that. I would say searching on a mobile device, there's a lot more to it than voice. You know, the mobile device is the first device that's designed from the ground up to be a personal device. You know, the computer was always a multi-user thing, even though for many years we've not used the computer as a multi-user thing, but everything was still designed to support multiple users. This is designed, I'm pointing in my pocket, that's where my phone is. This is designed as, you know, a single user device. You're constantly logged in, you never log out. So search on your phone has a huge amount of context about you. It also knows where you are, and that in many ways is more important, I think, for how powerful search can be on mobile than whether you happen to type some additional information or provide that additional information by voice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I mentioned before, I think Google is just on a 3-year mission to change behavior for search on mobile devices. I think they're just going to succeed in that. I agree with Albert. It's more than just search, to the extent that you inject elements of, you know, timeliness and location in there. Those search results just become better and better. I think kind of, you know, what's after that, especially on mobile devices, and it's like, you know, can you step out of the paradigm of what I would call intent search, right, where you speak or type in a keyword? Can my phone even anticipate what's coming next? And I think we're going there very quickly. You know, I'll jump in my car, and before I start driving, you know, the search engine has looked in my calendar. It knows I'm on my way to San Francisco. It gives me a heads up about a traffic jam. That's a form of search, right? Oh, there's an app which I use now. It's called Twist. And it's, you know, kind of gives me, you know, navigation, but it also automatically updates my wife as to when I will be home. So my wife doesn't have to call me anymore. That's a form of search, right? So it's so I think, you know, in combination with voice, I would like personally to see more of that, like, you know, just like being a step ahead of what's coming.
So this is one big thing that could kill Google, presumably, is if everybody uses apps, specialized search engines, but apps and so forth on mobile. Suddenly Google's kept out of that. And yet, for now, mobile search keeps just going through the roof. Every quarter, Google reports massive mobile searches and revenue from mobile and so forth. So far, that doesn't seem to be happening. Do you think it will happen?
Well, you know, it maybe does bring us back to the question of potential regulatory question, right? Which is, how easy should it be for you to switch out your default search provider? And generally, I'm a believer in competition, and so I think we should see where competition takes us. But if it takes us to a place where there is no competition, then maybe making it easier as a requirement to be able to swap out your default search provider, or at least make it a one-click install as a requirement, could be potentially a remedy. I think, you know, you don't want the remedy to be worse than the disease, so I think it's good, you know, innovation is happening so rapidly. I think we should see where this goes before we do anything. But, you know, on some browsers, it's very easy for somebody to add Dr. Koh, and on others it's not. And on mobile, it's a whole different ballgame altogether.
So let me introduce one more topic, and then we'll take some questions. And I have a bunch more if folks aren't feeling particularly curious about search. So let's talk about television. So for the last 10 years, you've had massive companies sort of mobilizing for the war of the living room. And in the United States, I know it's very different in Europe, United States, cable companies own television in a way that is just incredibly frustrating to anybody who watches TV. Because the interface is lousy, yet you cannot get what you want when you want it. All of these different kinds of companies are trying to come in to let you watch what you want, when you want it, and so forth, and yet the cable companies are keeping everybody out. The holy grail, the thing everybody wants, is that search interface, where you either talk to your TV, or think to your TV, or sit down and have your friends program for your TV. It just gives you what you want, when you want it. Apple wants to do that. Microsoft wants to do that. Google wants to do that. They've made Google TV. Everyone talks about Facebook video. They want to be in there. The cable companies are already in there. We have these huge entertainment companies holding on tight. Is anything going to happen with this? Or is it just going to be this perpetual, terrible consumer experience controlled by greedy companies that cannot be dislodged?
I think if we are talking about general web search, this will not happening on the TV screen. I think people will use it on a second device, which they have in the living room, some tablet or so, and they will search in parallel. This is what we call a second screen. But when we are talking about search for television programs. This might happening by voice, for example.
So I believe this is not really a search problem, it's a rights problem and a market structure problem, as you pointed out, but it's sort of beginning to solve itself. So you know, we invest in startups. Most of the startups employ young people. When I go around and I ask who's got a cable subscription, nobody raises their hand. I mean, they're all cord cutters. And about a year ago, we moved from the suburbs back to the city, and we just got internet. And we've got 3 kids. They don't know what a traditional TV channel is. I mean, they use YouTube and they use Vudu, and it's all on demand. And they never feel like, you know, they can't find what they want to look for.
So I agree, and that certainly describes our household, although yet for some reason, I still keep writing the $150 check every month. And you know what that reason is, by the way? Football. I hate to say it. There's no football on Vudu or Netflix.
You have to pay for your vices,
I know.
Henry.
It's terrible. And baseball, they are holding that. But how do your kids find it? Because I'll tell you what happens in my household. We want to watch something. Great. Netflix. Search that for a while. Not there. Search cable. Maybe it's for free this month for some reason. Search iTunes. Search YouTube. It's terrible. Where's the one search engine that'll just get me what I want? When is that coming?
I think if you're talking about video search in particular, that's probably the biggest disappointment for the last 10 years, right? It hasn't evolved at all. Look at speech recognition as search, you know, that has evolved, it works well, and you would think just throw computational power to it and you'll get video search to work, right? Give me a video with the Eiffel Tower and a blue background and well, that kind of search you can't do today. So I think we're still away from it. If there's any search in the traditional sense, I think it's going to be second screen, right? You know, through Twitter, like Shazam, who's making a very deliberate and successful effort in that space. I think, you know, the second piece is about rights, and it's very different, right? So if, you know, Apple, unlike Google, has really been able to work with the content industry, you know, and like if there's anything that they could do this year, it's obviously come out with the Apple TV, not so much about search, but how how can you unbundle certain television programs, and if there's one company who could do it, it's probably Apple.
Any questions? Esther?
So you've all been talking about search as how to get to a particular web page. Siri is slightly different, but when search becomes really interesting, it organizes the world and then presents, whether it's a map or a list of restaurants categorized by cuisine, or it's a flight schedule. Can you talk more about structured search and where you see the market heading in that?
I agree. That's why I was saying earlier, I think that thinking of search as just a very limited find a web page is a very, very narrow view of what search is. And I believe what's happening is that we have these sort of pools of information, and it's upon the providers who have these pools to figure out what a compelling user experience is that will get people to search there and remember that they should go and search there, as opposed to each time thinking, oh, I'm just going to go over here and reflexively type something into my, you know, either phone or browser. So that's what I was talking about. Those kind of searches tend to be one click away, although Google is pulling some of them into Google itself. You know, they're obviously going after some of the travel searches as one area. But I think that focused providers can still deliver an experience that's sufficiently valuable and sufficiently differentiated that they can survive. It's just that they will have some smaller share of a smaller subsegment.
I think for structured search, it's also important that future search engines understand what they are searching for. So far, it's merely text-based search, so search engines don't know what exactly they are searching for. And if search engines in the future will understand facts and organize facts and combine those facts, they will be able also to provide a much more structured search results.
One more question?
How far off do you think we are from like a true semantic search engine that works?
So the question is how far we are from a true semantic search engine. Can you define semantic search engine?
No, I don't think. I think you can probably
Can
define
anyone
it better
define
than
it?
me.
Because I've been hearing this word for 10 years and I still don't know what it means. A search engine driven by something other than keywords in a thing that somehow knows what you want before you do. How far are we from that, Wolf?
No, I think that's a little bit what I was talking about. Semantic search is about understanding things, and I think this will be definitely the future of search, but I believe that we will have to wait 5 or 10 years until we see the first reasonable results for this.
And I think actually the worlds are coming together. We were talking about this before. Like people get really sophisticated about how they perform their keyword queries, right? It's almost a language in its own right. And so surely semantic search will improve, but I think people themselves improve in how they search.
Well, at the end of the day, people using something don't care whether it's semantics or squirrels doing the work. So I think it's all about targeting a specific use case and applying all the technologies that let you create a unique user experience for that use case and make it possible for you to find the things that people are looking for. And there's already plenty of semantic search at work, but it's just one tool.
So basically just, instead of thinking that this is something utterly different, semantic, which is like better search, smarter search, I hope. I don't know. And if there's a definition of semantic, I'm not trying to make light of it at all. It sounds great. It's one of those words that I've heard forever. It's like, wait, but what does it mean exactly? Gentlemen, thank you so much. This is great. It's been a pleasure.